I want to welcome Adam Lyons to Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you are the host of the Modern Meeting podcast, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. But can you just give a little bit of a background about who you are to the audience?
Absolutely, yeah. I am a compulsive gambler in recovery. My last bet was February 8th, 2022. I gambled pretty heavily from the age of 18 to 38. I was one of those people that lived a double life. I wouldn't say that my gambling was in the shadows by any means, especially in the last 10 years of it, but I always paid my bills, always had a job. That's what I mean with the double life. You know, people probably knew that there was something going on there, but nobody, even those closest to me, had any idea like the depths of what I was going through. Um, it started out innocently ish with poker in college. And it kind of graduated to table games and casinos. Casinos was probably that was my thing. I did sports betting. I mean, I gambled on everything. I did scratch tickets. I did everything, but casinos, craps, slot machines were my biggest vices with gambling. After 20 years, I had a moment where, not to go back too far, but basically after 10 years, I declared bankruptcy. I had about $30,000 worth of debt, and after the bankruptcy, I maybe went 3, 4 months without gambling. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I didn't have any money. And then basically, you know, once the itch came back, I was like, well, I can't gamble around here. I can't gamble around like my hometown. So for the last 10 years of my gambling, I lived in 6 different cities, had 20 different jobs, 12 different addresses, and it was basically just me looking for that fresh start, looking for, why aren't I progressing in life when all I had to do was look in the mirror and be like, it's because you're gambling. And that led me to Austin, Texas, was the last of my 6 city tour. And for 6 months, I lived in Austin. And the reason I went there is because there was no casino within 4 or 5 hours. And so at this point, I knew I had a problem, but I just couldn't really stop. And I was working at a poker room in Austin, which we'll get to. I worked in the industry for a little bit. And I did what I thought I wouldn't do. And I got half drunk one night, lost a big sports bet. And then I drove 5 hours in the middle of the night to Windstar in Oklahoma, was the nearest casino. And I emptied every account I had. I borrowed from coworkers I barely knew. And when the dust settled, I had lost a lot of the money that I was supposed to be saving to move back up east. And sitting in that parking lot in Oklahoma, I had what I've now realized was kind of a spiritual awakening, um, where I had this feeling wash over me that I can't describe to this day. But all I know is that in that moment, as I'm looking around in Oklahoma by myself, 5 a.m., like I don't want to live this life anymore. Like I want to live life, but I don't want to live this life. Like I'm ready. I can't do this anymore. And 6 days later, I found a 12-step meeting in Austin. It saved my life. Um, and I haven't looked back since. And about a year and a half into recovery, I said, "Where is everybody? Why am I the youngest person by 25 years, and I'm not that young? And why aren't there a lot of women? Like I know that gambling is exploding outside. Like we gotta, I mean, you guys, this is a good thing we got going in these rooms. Like we gotta get it out to the masses." And so that was pretty much the inspiration to start the podcast. And so basically, we're closing in on 1 year with the modern meeting. And what started out as I wanted to kind of give an inside scoop to my story, to other people's stories, and to get people to a meeting. It's that's not the mission anymore. The mission now is to build a community and to just, you know, break the stigma and to get as many people as possible to share their story on the modern meeting. And hopefully, that gives people strength to do, might not be go to a meeting, but it might be just to open up to someone that they love that they might have a problem, or to go seek out a counselor, or seek out a clinician, or seek any type of help, right? Um, and it's been going pretty good. I mean, I I I hooked up with Christina Cook of Broke Girl Society and Rob Minnick of ODAT, and they've kind of brought me into their circle, the Lived Experience Collective. And the last 6 months of the podcast, it's just kind of growing and growing, and the community is building. And I started a meeting on Zoom on Mondays, and here we are now. And now I'm talking to you.
Yeah, that's amazing. And for listeners who don't know, like we have met before. We met in person
Hmm.
at the national conference, and one thing I did notice was part of that the Lives Collective group, which is uh, a few individuals with lived experience who have podcasts, and it's been started, slow, silent, but the noise is to me getting louder, getting more recognition. But it really started with people with lived experience sharing their story on a platform of a podcast, and that's pretty unique for the gambling area because that's not one that I don't see that familiar with other areas. But this is a group that knows each other that's all across the country, right? Like was it five
I think
state?
there's, yeah,
Like,
yeah. I mean, we got people in Oregon, we got people in Oklahoma, Philadelphia. I'm in Massachusetts. Yeah, it's we got people all over the place, and we're growing. We're looking to bring on more members for sure.
yeah, so that's incredible because I've always said gambling in so many areas is so far behind than where we are with like substance use and mental health. And even though we continue to talk about the needs in all those areas, that gambling has always been way below the surface, way, you know, we could say substance use and mental health have maybe gotten a little bit more miles down the road, but gambling awareness, education, resources, treatment is still half a marathon back, like way, way back. So to see this being something that elevates it, that makes it unique, to me does recognize that there are some things about gambling that's catching up or that's changing from how it used to be. Maybe not as much as we want, but we are seeing more people share their stories. We're seeing more platforms of gambling and talking about it. So part of me wants to just give you, your flowers for being a part of that group that is making that happen because it's not easy. It requires a lot of vulnerability, it requires, risk taking with sharing your story because having struggling with gambling is not the most easiest thing to announce publicly or to announce to a platform like a podcast.
Which I don't even really understand because, and I was talking about this the other day on an episode where it's like, why are people so much more comfortable admitting that they have an issue with drugs or alcohol rather than gambling? It's interesting. It's like for me, you know, I struggled for 20 years. So I understand that it's probably a lot easier for a 38-year-old to walk into that church basement having wasted 20 years of his life rather than like a 22 or 23-year-old who's struggling with online gambling to walk into a church basement where you're not the youngest by 25 years, you're the youngest by 40 years. But yeah, and I mean, you nailed it on the head where it's like when I started the podcast, I thought we were behind. I didn't even realize how far behind we were as far as just the fact that, like the glaring thing that everyone references is the fact that there is zero federal funding for gambling. Yet the latest prevalence studies, we're not too far behind. Not that it's a race, God forbid, but we're not too far behind drugs and alcohol as far as the amount of people in this country that identify as problem gamblers or people who struggle with gambling. So, I think it's just, unfortunately, it's just a matter of time before, enough people um, suffer because the one thing, I mean, death, taxes, the house always wins, right? It's just a matter of time before these trust funds run out or, these credit cards get maxed out, right? Like it's there's unfortunately there's a storm coming. And, you know, I just feel like, we're kind of asleep at the wheel right now. And, I take pride in the fact that I'm part of a group like the Lived Experience Collective and honestly people like you who are trying to shake that driver at the wheel, like wake up, let's go. Like we want to be proactive about this, right?
Yeah, and I applaud the things I am seeing change because there's a lot of things. I mean, being a counselor in this profession for over 20 years, I know like this year I presented at two conferences. One was a crisis conference, and one was on prevent suicide conference. And for both of them, I submitted proposals for talks on gambling and suicide because I amazed at how often we might talk about suicide, but we don't mention gambling. Like just not at all. So I was really happy that I got them. Both were selected, both were picked, and both went really well. But both conference organizers told me that they've never had topics on gambling at their conferences before. But also, they told me no one ever submitted for that. No one ever said, let's talk about it. And when you have a conference, you wait and see what everyone submits to you and you go through that. So they also weren't asking, but people also weren't submitting. So when I look at things like that, I'm grateful that we're starting to get more people aware of it, wanting to talk about it. I get really excited. This is weird. I don't know if you get this, but I get excited when colleagues and friends send me like articles that are like, "Oh my gosh, did you see this was talked about sports gambling last night on this special? Or did you notice that this was mentioned on this high profile late night show?" And as much as I'm like, well, I don't want more people being harmed by gambling, but I'm glad other people are seeing it and not just passing by it. They're telling me, "Hey, I saw this. I recognize this." That took a while to get to that point. Like
Absolutely.
it took a long time to tell people, "Hey, read the articles, pay attention, don't just flip by it." So now when people send me emails, send me LinkedIn messages, send me texts when they're like, "I saw this," part of me is like, "Okay, that's different. This is change. May not be as fast as we want, but it is there are some things that are helping to get more attention for what's been years of loud voices finally being heard."
Yeah. And kind of piggybacking off that, I have kind of pivoted over the last few months where I think that there are plenty of resources treatment wise. The the main problem right now is that people don't want to admit that they have a problem. That's the problem. The problem is that the people don't want to admit it. So how can we treat those who aren't coming to us, right? And that's, it's something that I spoke to someone at the Mass Council on Gaming and Health. Shout out to Odessa. And that was her answer when I said to her, like, what can we do differently with treatment? And she was like, we need people to show up, right? Like, and so that's where that's where I come in. That's where everyone who's out there sharing their story right now and trying to break down this stigma, that's where we come in, where it's like just like when a kid who Kevin Hart is his favorite actor when they see him on TV placing a bet, they place a bet. You know, I want someone to be scrolling through Instagram and hear me share a dark, ridiculous, awful part of my story, and then they might think, "Oh, damn, like I actually did that too." Like and then maybe they go down a rabbit hole and then maybe they come to a realization, right? Obviously, I think we could expedite the process if we got some, there's got to be some celebrities out there that have a gambling problem. You know what I mean? Like that's the other thing I've been saying too is that it's like, you know, the operators and the online sports books, people often say, I think the volume of ads is out of control, but I also think this is capitalism. Like this is a free market, right? But if they are throwing celebrities and AI inspired, advertising out at all of us. And we're just let's pass a bill at Capitol Hill and let's do things the right way. Like that's I just don't think that's working. Like let's throw some celebrities in the algorithm, right? Let's find someone out there who has a name even if they just struggled with gambling. Like I know someone like Kendrick Perkins, former basketball player for the Boston Celtics. Like there's clips of him online talking about that at one point he struggled with gambling, right? Antoine Walker, another basketball player for the Celtics, unfortunately, it's public knowledge that he struggled with gambling. Like, get one of these guys who's in recovery to go around and do some outreach and do some, spread some awareness. Like, like that. Let's
That is
try to match
important.
them. Yeah,
I didn't think about that because when I think about other things going back, there was always some known celebrities that sort of did put a spotlight. Like I think one of my earliest ones is like Dick Van Dyke with alcohol. Like he
yeah,
was one of the first. I don't think he was like the first, but to me, like he was one of the ones who had like a well-known figure and talked about his struggle with alcohol, and that became like a really big change. And you look at how many celebrities now talk about being in recovery or no longer using some substances like drugs.
yeah.
Or even hear about like you mentioned NBA and we saw like the big thing with like Kevin Love. You know, when Kevin Love talked about his mental health,
Mm-hmm.
we're hearing people talk about mental health. We're hearing other celebrities and musicians and other people share about mental health, but you're you're right that gambling has yet to really see someone who's an individual that people can connect with on like a larger level, seeing that they struggle or they're in recovery from gambling. Whoever does that is gonna get a lot of praise because
Yeah.
that's tough.
No, and I think too, like to your point about like celebrities, like I mean, I literally think all of my favorite actors are all well-known sober people. Like Bradley Cooper, like right, he's sober. Armchair expert Dax Shepard, one of the biggest podcasts in the world, like he talks about mental health. He's sober. I don't think that it's a coincidence that if you look at alcohol consumption over the last couple of years, it is down like I don't know the numbers, but it's down a lot. I worked in the food and beverage industry for a lot of years, and I have a lot of friends in there, and they're like, Adam, nobody drinks anymore.
Yeah,
And I
and the NA stuff
exactly,
is
and that's not a. I,
booming.
I I think that you absolutely can attribute some of those numbers to this new celebrity way of living life, without having a drink. So it's like I think there's something there, guys. Like there's got to be someone out there. But that's the thing too. It's like if there was someone out there, are they going to have the strength to be the first one, right? Or who's gonna step up to the plate, you know? So yeah, I don't know. It's like I said, it's gonna happen. Like we're things things usually always have to just get worse and more people have to suffer in order for change to happen. And it's gonna happen. It's just gonna take some time, I think.
Yeah, I was doing a training on gambling, going over like the history of it, and I was saying, you know, when you compare it to like opioid use, because I do a lot of work with opioid use disorder, like most people who are involved in that work are aware of like the different waves that we've had with different substances and the impact on overdoses. And I'd be curious to know what those waves would look like when it comes to, you know, gambling with suicide or gambling when it comes to like debt or like certain things. But I was telling people that for a while, because gambling's been around for
Forever.
forever, right?
Yeah.
Then you have the person who's like, you know, I got in my car today. That was a gamble. Okay, we're not talking about that kind of gamble,
Yeah.
but forms
I
of
I don't
for
like those people.
yeah, you hear that though too, right? Do you ever hear that
No, I know. I know.
someone's trying to be like, you know, life's a risk, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
usually you're not coming to therapy because of getting in your car, but
Yeah.
gambling's been around for forever, and I would say for the most part, as it went through changes, we've seen sort of like little waves of like the impact. But I think now, as we've seen the expansion of sports betting, we've also seen the technology change entirely for how gambling exists. We've also seen some of the things with mental health and all that, that now we're like starting to be at that early big swing of like that tide of like what we can expect to see happen. So for a while, we've been saying that this is a concern or an issue. We've been trying to say it while the waters were just getting a little bit higher, and we've been able to kind of do our best to maintain that. But I think now is the point where I think some people are realizing that this isn't going to be the wave that just goes down again. This is one that could keep going higher. And that's what has a lot of us worried that does this work.
Sure. And you know, I take great pride in my lived experience and my, you know, it's a privilege for me to be able to share my story with people. And I try to tell people, it's like, listen, I am not unique, right? Like, there are so many people that share my story that are in the shadows, and none of us ever had a casino in our pocket, right? Like, if I didn't stop when I stopped February 8th, 2022, and I waited another 6 months or a year, and I could play craps while I was laying in bed or while I was driving to work, I might still be out there. Like, I don't think that that is one of my biggest frustrations is, and I don't, gambling should not be, I think people can gamble normally, but I don't know if I can get on board with gambling on your phone. Like, gambling should be like a source of entertainment, right? That's everyone's argument. Like, it's a source of entertainment. It's a night out. Well, what about the guy who's doom scrolling on his couch? Is that a night out? Is that entertainment? No. He is, unfortunately, has an unhealthy relationship with gambling. I got that from you. I didn't use the stigmatizing words. And he's in isolation and he's emptying his credit card or he's emptying his 401k. Like, I don't know. Like, I think that online casinos and being able to gamble on your phone is ultimately, that's gonna be that's gonna be the final nail in this whole thing.
I realized that when I started working with people and how we had to work on coping strategies and ways of getting out of certain situations was so different when they were using a phone versus like I remember when I first started working with gambling, it would be like the person at the casino and they just lost all their money and they were going to the ATM. And I remember this. I remember some of these individuals where we would talk about like coping skills for not going back to the ATM. There'd be that buffer zone between like I just lost it, now I need to go like get some money, or how can we work on you just like walking straight out? Who could you call? Like there used to be a little bit of a buffer in between some of the action, I would say, because there
Mm,
was like these things that you had to go places, you had to get money, you had to do all that. But now I've seen the buffer for that has shrunk so much because it is it is in your pocket or it's on a website. Also, like to get money to reload or to just do that is like sometimes a an easy like click of a button. It's not having to go to the ATM and do this and get this and do that. So like all these little things that I saw as buffers, like moments to kind of let interventions happen or to apply this, it was really challenging when someone's like, there is no casino that I'm going to. I'm not driving anywhere. I'm not having to go to a bank or have to go get cash. Like that was such a change in how I even worked with someone to help them prevent going back to gambling or to find a way to get out of there. So that required a lot of changes with something like on the phone.
mm.
Like
Yeah.
that was so new that that wasn't the issue before. And then it was like, oh wait, now those are all like gone. Those
Yeah.
those buffers are like
Yeah, like
non-existent.
towards the end of my gambling was in three acts basically. And act 3 was all about borrowing money and bouncing checks and finding different ways. I used to call them PayPal tricks where, back, I don't know if it's like this now, but basically, like, if my credit was decent enough, I could send you $1,000 on PayPal, even though I have no money in my checking account, because it's going to take 24 hours to clear. And then if you send me back that $1,000, I can then put it into my checking account like it's like you sent it to me. It's $1,000. And I hate to say that out loud because I don't want to give people ideas, but like it is what it is. But I would do that with Venmo. I would do that with PayPal. But to your point, like I still had to physically drive and go to the ATM. I still had to physically drive and go to the casino. You know, um, sometimes my bank wouldn't let me take out X amount, so I'd have to go to the casino and I'd have to do a cash advance, or I'd have to go to the cage and write a virtual check, and they obviously there's all kinds of fees and interest there. But yeah, nowadays, and the thing too, it's like it's pretty easy for someone who's underage to do this on a phone. All you need is a social security number and an address, or, if you know someone who's 18 and they let you go on, hey, I'll send you $500. Can I use your account? You know what I mean? Like, so I'm going to butcher the quote, and I can't even remember who was on the modern meeting and they said this, but it was something along the lines of the more accessible something is, like the more it should be regulated. And I feel like gambling is now so accessible. I mean, what cracks me up is like 3 years ago, 4 years ago tops, gambling was, oh, no, 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 no gambling as far as the sports teams and the ESPN. No, 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 no. We can't do no, can't talk about gambling. I mean, there's literal quotes from commissioners of major sports being like, we
Oh
cannot
yeah,
do gambling.
super. Yeah, it's gonna be against.
And and,
It was gonna
and
ruin the
now it's
legacy of the game. It
oh
was
yeah.
a lot of
And,
worrisome, pretty staunch, like
oh, like
um cemented. It felt like cemented, not
cemented.
not not moving this. And then the landmark case happened,
Yeah.
and what a change.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh, okay, we can make money. Great, let's do it. And just everything they said thrown out the window. I mean, I'm watching the Bruins last night. Brad Marchand's first game back as a visiting player, and there's this beautiful tribute, and he's crying, and I'm almost crying, and everything's great. And then the next thing you know, will Brad Marchand score a goal tonight? It's plus 165 on the ESPN bet app, and it's like, holy, oh, like, where, how do we get to this point? You
Which is
know?
interesting because like and I see that so often too, where all of a sudden I'm hearing someone, who was it? It was I think it was Caitlin Clark. I don't know if it was during her last, it was during some milestone she was about to hit where all of a sudden they mentioned like the odds of her hitting it from a certain spot. And it was mentioned while the game was
Mm,
being played. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, this is becoming so common, but we don't even realize that they don't really do that with anything else. They don't really do that. Like, imagine if they were talking about a sporting event and they were like, is this person gonna hit a homer or do this? And by the way, don't forget about to eat your Doritos. Like almost doing like live advertising
yeah,
during like a play call, which if they did that for any other like non-gambling service, right? If they did
yeah,
that for your favorite snack, your chips, whatever the case may be, also we'd be like what? Like, isn't that why there's commercials? Like, I don't want
yeah.
to hear that while I'm watching this. But that is happening so much more with sports. And I don't even think people are get caught off like all of a sudden I'm listening to something, I'm like, whoa, like that came out of nowhere. Like
Hmm.
not even planning for that to happen, but it's just becoming so common that it's becoming such a part of the language around sports
Hmm.
is like the odds of someone or the over under on something or the line. Like that's now becoming almost a commonplace in commentary.
Yeah, they almost lead with that rather than the actual like matchups. You know what I mean? Like that. I mean, instead of like analysts like on a pregame show, like Okay, who has the advantage at quarterback? Who has it? They're talking about like, all right, what's our same game parlay gonna be? It's like, I, yeah, no, it's when we go down this rabbit hole, I can't help but just get really discouraged because um there's just it's a combination of greed, but then it's also a combination, if I want to play devil's advocate, I think the numbers and the number of people that are struggling, it's not accurate because once again, they're not saying they have a problem.
Right.
They don't call it the hidden addiction for a reason. Like it's so I just think that
And we're not always asking. So like
yeah,
if we're not
yeah,
asking if like you could look at so many things like as I said before, like I work a lot with opioid use and with others, and we do things where we could look at the numbers of individuals who are using opiates, using other substances, like because we have things that we're asking about, there's things that we're testing for, right? Like we have different ways to
mm,
look at demographics and we could say this is what we're seeing based on this. But I just had this research looked into was less than 10% of providers ask about gambling. So if we're not asking about it, if people aren't comfortable bringing it up or sharing it, then there's no question that the number is underreported.
for sure.
That
And
it's not what it is, but it's part of it is we don't seem to, not all of us, but some people don't seem to want to know or want to
yeah,
ask.
totally. And I think, you know, obviously my I have a small sample size, but like I've basically been consistently in three different GA meetings in my 3 years and 9 months in recovery. And I would say more than half, probably three-quarters of the people in these rooms are members of another fellowship, right? So it's like all these people that are in here because they're struggling with gambling, they also are going to AA or NA. So it's like, to your point, there's a lot of people that if they're struggling with something, they're most likely struggling with almost everything. Like I'm kind of a unicorn in the sense that like I can have two beers. I've always been like that. I never drank when I gambled, which is everyone's just like, "What?" Like that's the best part about gambling is getting drunk and gambling. I don't drink, I don't do drugs. I've never struggled with any of that, but gambling was obviously another story. Um yeah, but
Have you heard anything that this got brought up to me at a conference when I was talking because I was looking at um resources and stuff that's available for people with you know with gambling and I'm just curious what you're hearing because a lot of it comes down to what do people know that if someone walks into an AA meeting, NA meeting, and I always say it's hard to tell, but it's different because each meeting's different. Like not
mm,
every meeting's the same. But have you seen any change in if someone's struggling with gambling and they walk into an AA meeting, NA meeting, because that's the only thing near them. It's the only thing
mm,
that's there. There isn't a
yeah,
GA meeting on every corner.
right.
Have you heard from guests or in your experience that that's being more welcomed or being
Yeah.
more accepted? Because I think that's come up quite a bit. What I tell people is, from what I hear, it's been more acceptable to whatever you're struggling with. This is why we're here. But I know in
Yeah.
the past that wasn't always as welcoming. So any thoughts on that or anything that you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, both in the rooms themselves and also talking to people on the podcast, I think if someone walks into most, if not all, AA or NA meetings and they start talking about gambling in their share, they're gonna get pulled aside at the end of the meeting, and be like, hey, sounds like you might need to go to GA too. You know what I mean? There's a very good you know, brotherly, cousinly relationship, I think, that the AA, NA, and GA have. But I've also heard and spoke to people who I've had a few people early on in the modern meeting that were just struggled with drugs and alcohol, and they were like, I didn't even know that GA existed. This is 2025, right? Like, and they're just like, I didn't even know there was a GA. But yeah, it's awesome. Sounds like you guys are doing the same stuff we are. 12 steps, cool. Yeah. Like, and that's essentially, I mean, a lot of GA's literature is just plugging in the word gambling for alcohol. But yeah, I think once again, I just think that, you know, you know way better than me, but as far as like, it was just put in that section of the DSM-5 like what, like 10 years ago. So it's like the science world didn't even consider it that big of a deal 10 years ago. So, I mean, what are we supposed to think? I mean, but then it's like, there's some people that I've been in meetings with who have been going to GA for 40 years. So it's like, I don't know. It's uh it's obviously an ongoing thing that,
Right.
I think there's a lot of people who care. I will say that there's a lot of people who care right now, but we're all going in different directions. We're all trying different things. We're all trying to put out this fire like in our own ways. Where I think, especially when it comes to like the lived experience community and the science community, like I think they need to do a lot more collaborating and talking. And I think, I just think that recovery, especially obviously like the two big things like prevention and treatment, like we need to do a better job of trying to just, whether it's like a hub, like a centralized hub. Like I know there's 1-800-GAMBLER and there's other things that are nationally known, but I think we just need to do more, right? Because, like I'll talk to someone like Tana Russell in Oregon at Evergreen. Oh, no, not Oregon. They're in Washington at Evergreen, where it sounds like they're doing amazing things. They have all these resources. They have all these different programs that they're doing on a next to no budget. And then you have other states that don't even have a council for gambling,
That's so
right? So,
true. That's so true. There's so many, when people ask questions to me about some resources or things, there's usually a place I can reference or a state I can point to and say they've got a really amazing program that does this,
yeah,
but it's not replicated all over. And then I say there's a really amazing, like when it comes to this though, which is different, this place does a really good job with this, but it's not replicated all over. So if you
right.
really want the great part of this, you got to go out east. If you want
Yeah.
the really good part about this, you got to go northwest. But like there are like I give this is where I give a lot of credit to becoming a gambling counselor. One of the things that it did for me was it really makes you have to be willing to talk about finances with somebody. Because you can't not talk about finances with gambling. Like it just doesn't work, right? You can't just be like, "Oh, okay, like you've lost some money. Well, let's talk about like managing your triggers with money." Like, no, you got to talk about how much are you in debt? How much do you owe this person? You got to talk about what's repayment going to look like? I've always said we don't do the best at that with substance use
Mm,
and mental health. Like we look at those areas and someone tells us how much they're using, how much they've spent. Sometimes they say they're going to go to treatment and people kind of like wipe away their debt. They kind of say, well, they went to treatment, so we're just gonna anything that they stole or anything that they borrowed to get that, like, hey, at least they got into treatment. Gambling doesn't let that happen.
right.
Gambling debt follows you. So I say that because there's a lot of great places I know that have amazing resources for financial recovery.
Hmm.
I forgot, I don't know if it's your state or one of the states that even has like a 1 year program if you live in the state where you can get help for gambling, for finances, and for like a year, like you can get this support for free. And like that's really amazing, but it's in that state
Yeah,
only. This
right.
is not one that we have replicated in all of our states. So I'm really glad you brought that up because gambling does have some amazing work and programs that you wouldn't always hear about. The people who do, it does tremendous work, but because of the work that we do, it's it's not replicated,
Yeah.
you know.
and honestly, as we're talking, I'm kind of coming to a realization that, say what you want about GA, but it's the same yellow book in all 50 states, right? It's the same red book in all 50 states. And, even though some meetings are probably more welcoming than others, and some meetings have a lower median age than others, they all they're all operating under the same set of steps. And I think that most GA rooms are welcoming, most GA rooms are warm, most GA rooms will help you. And so, you know I think that even though GA, I feel like GA, right? How I feel about GA is that, like, they have the answers to the test inside all those church basements, but they don't want to share it with anybody, right? Like, they don't want to promote themselves. They don't want to, like, I can remember when I was thinking about doing the podcast, I was like, hey, why don't we, like, put something in the paper or on social media letting people know that we're here? Oh, no, 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 we can't do that. They need to find us. What? What? We don't need to put our names and addresses and faces on there. Let's just say that, like, if you're struggling, there's a Gamblers Anonymous meeting Tuesday nights in Rumford, Rhode Island. Like, we can't say that? No, can't say that. Can't do that. And that's where GA drops the ball big time, you know?
Yeah. And for me, I go to the places, had to stay grounded with some things, but also had to be willing to like realize that things are also different at times.
Sure.
Like to me, I would hope that any person, and this is where I go from whatever meeting it is, I'm just hoping that if someone walked in and said, I'm struggling with this, whatever it is. I don't know what to do, but th this is why I'm here. To me, I'm I try to be the ultra supporter where I'm
Mm,
like to anyone that comes to a meeting or walks in somewhere and is saying to a bunch of strangers, I don't expect them to know everything at that point. I don't expect them to have all the answers. It's probably why they're there. But to me, like, I just want to see that person welcomed and knowing that they made the right choice to come here.
yeah,
Like, I think that's where I'm hopeful because we can't, because this is for a lot of things, because like there's not always an AA meeting everywhere. There's not always an NA meeting. There's not always a GA meeting. There's not always a smart recovery. There's not always a celebrate. Like, we talk so much about issues with rural areas because of lack of, but we also don't have like all these things everywhere. The options aren't always what we want them to be. Sometimes it's just what's there. And I'd still want that person to know that going there is a good decision. Like it's a good first step. And maybe
for sure.
someone can guide you somewhere else or help you to give you a resource. But to me, when someone makes that decision to go, there's already so much going on. Like, how do we remove barriers and obstacles? How do we make the threshold to get a sense that there's hope a lot easier? Like, I'm always like, roll out the red carpet. Like, we should
Right.
be applauding people. Like, that's the disruptor in me where I'm like, we should be like applauding people and rolling out red carpet, opening the door. That when you're here, that's what matters most.
Yeah, like when I walked into my first meeting, the first person looked at looked me in the eyes, shook my hand, and congratulated me. And I'm like, congrat for what? Right? Like, I'm in a GA meeting. I'm a loser, right? And they're like, nah, man, like you made it. Like, this is the first step. And I always say that, like, 7 o'clock, 7 p.m., February 8th, 2022, I went to my first meeting. By 7:15, I had completed step one. I had admitted and realized that my life had become unmanageable, right? That I surrendered 15 minutes in, and that was because of the people and because of the literature, right? And it wasn't, I didn't have a connection with my higher power initially. The stuff that prevents people from going in these rooms. It was in all the craziness that's going on in this world, and then me on top of it, gambling for 20 years. I walked into a space where every single person in that room had been through what I had been through, had a genuine connection with me immediately. And just that warmth and that support and that feeling, like to your point, like we need these places for the people that are ready to step in these rooms. But so now where I'm struggling, and I'd love to hear what you think about this as a counselor. So I'm in the process of getting my IGRS, the International Gambling Recovery Specialist, and I talk to people and I'm doing some one-on-ones, and I'm I'm not gonna say I'm struggling, but like some of these meetings where they either go back out and gamble after they had me convinced that they were good to go, or I can tell that they're most likely lying to me and they are gambling. And I can see myself. It's like I go back in a time machine. I think of me 10 years ago lying to my parents, lying to people, and it breaks my heart. And then I have to stop myself and say, Adam, it took you 20 years to get help. So you got to give these people some more time, right? But that's just the power of it's the power of this. I don't want to use the D word, but it's the power of that hold that gambling has on them, that they're willing to lie, to cheat, to steal. They're willing to do whatever it takes. And it's just I give so much credit to all of you people who work with people who are struggling and dealing with the relapses and dealing with the lying. It's something that I need to absolutely like get used to and work on.
So there's something I, not many people ask me questions on this
Yeah.
podcast, on my podcast, but this is why it's great. So I will say that I s- I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I'm not the same counselor I was today than when I first started. But when I first started, I worked in all places that you they were abstinent from substances. And not that they necessarily chose to, but I worked at a group home for kids. I worked at a halfway house for men. I worked in a residential program. So these are where people like they live and they get treatment, and kids went to school, guys went to work, but also they were very strict, no, couldn't use substances policies. You'd get kicked out, or if they were on probation at the time, which a lot of them were for one of the programs, they would get taken back and thrown in jail.
Hmm.
So for probably 10 years of my career, I just worked with people who were abstinent. And sometimes it was 30 days, 60 days. Got lucky if it was 90, and then they'd be done, and I didn't really hear from them again because that was the max of it, right? So, and I loved all those experience. I think back a lot of where I worked and what I take away from them. But then I started working in a place where people were still actively using. And I realized I really never worked with anyone who was still using. I didn't know what that was like because I was always working with someone who had to stop because of like they were in jail or they had to go away, and it was always working on prevention, like
Hmm.
preventing using again. So I never actually worked with someone who came in and was saying, I'm using alcohol, I'm struggling, or I'm using heroin and I can't stop. That was so new to me, fish out of water, right?
Hmm.
So in my career now, I have it where, I working with someone who could still be gambling, still be using substances. And what I've learned, and I didn't know this at the time, was we never get to pick where we are in someone's journey.
Yes.
I thought it was almost like a conveyor belt where people showed up at treatment day one, and then they worked their way through this,
Mm-hmm.
and it was going to end up with like a similar outcome. Like they completed the program, they did all like it. Honestly, looking back, felt like it was almost like a conveyor belt. Like everyone was going to get started the same, and they were going to leave. But I started to realize that we never get to pick where someone is in their journey. I might be the first counselor they work with, but there could be a good chance I won't be the last one that they work with. Or they've worked with a bunch of counselors, and maybe now I'm the next in line. So for me, what has always helped me was realizing that we don't get to choose where we are in someone's journey. And for the most part, they don't know where they're at in their journey either.
Sure.
But whenever we are, that we're in a pretty unique spot to provide safety, support. You know, we're the guides along their path and their journey. And forever time we get the privilege to be on that path, I want to make it matter most because I wasn't there when it started. I don't think I'm going to be there for the full end, but for that portion that I'm a part of it, I'm really trying to do the best that I can. Because I worked with a guy, I just told this to someone earlier, and I'm kind of glad you brought this up, that I worked with someone for alcohol use. They had a DUI in Wisconsin, which in Wisconsin, it takes you a couple DUIs for them to take it serious. So he was from a county that I didn't even know of, but they had him to get his license back. He had to come see me for a year of counseling every week. Every week for a year, he had to come see me.
Wow.
And his wife had to drive him because he didn't have his license.
Right.
So so that was a big thing. But he saw me for a year and honestly, he did not stop his drinking. Now, he didn't drive because he didn't have his license. His wife drove him, but he actually never stopped his drinking. And I saw him for a whole year and he never fully stopped. Now, he did reduce his drinking. He used to drink a lot more and then he started drinking less. There was more periods of abstinence. There was less hiding of it than when there was before. So like there were some things that changed. But when he completed the year, he was still drinking. Then 3 years passed since I saw him. I got a letter from his wife that he died. And this was an older gentleman. He was like in his 80s, right? But I got a letter that she wrote to me saying, "Thank you so much for all the work that you did with us." And I remember the last part of it was, "I just wanted to let you know, I know he continued to drink when he was doing counseling and stuff. I want you to know he died sober.
Oh,
Like he was sober during the final year of his life." And for me, I got to be along with him in a different part of his journey, and I'm really grateful for that.
definitely.
And to me, I think some of us look at it as, oh, if you had been sober during my time, that we, but to me, like that wasn't the part I was joining him with. I
Right.
got to join him in a part that was different. So I use things like that and reminders to think about the fact that most people don't know where they are in their journey. So the best thing we can do is to support them wherever they are, but we don't know where that is, and we don't get to pick. You know, we don't get to pick the, okay, we're gonna join you when you're sober and enjoy this. Like we might see you when you're in the worst of your worst,
Mm.
in the time that you are struggling more than anything. And what can I do in those moments? Because I want you to know there's still support and help wherever you are along that journey. So I hope that
Yeah.
helps you. Um,
I'm so glad I asked you this. That was amazing. That's why you're the pro. Oh my
yeah,
God.
but that took some time to understand and
Yeah.
learn, and a lot of experience. So yeah, I appreciate you asking that. That's great.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
So I want to talk, before we kind of wrap things up, I do want to get back to when I hear people talk about gambling, sports betting in particular, because that's getting a lot of attention, gambling on phones and all that. I do get sometimes a lot of the doom and gloom feel, where sometimes it's like, I don't know if I walked out of here feeling that we can do something about this, or like what was the takeaway? Because we want to provide education, we want to provide awareness, we want to let people know there's some serious things, but we also want to let people know there's things that we can do, that there are things we are doing, that it doesn't have to get to the point that it does. So knowing what you mentioned about creating space where people can go to the treatment that's available or attend the meeting that's there, that gap between, we know that there are these services, there are these resources, but people aren't showing up or people aren't knocking on the door. I will say people come to me more often and say I have a problem with porn than a problem with gambling.
See?
All right, yeah. So how do we, or how do you like think about how we can bridge that gap where we can make those paths more clear that there is somewhere to go or to illuminate, these roadways to the different things that are there for people. Like how do you do that, or how do you think we can get better at highlighting what is out there for people? Because there is stuff. Like this
Yeah,
isn't
I
nothing.
yeah, I think a lot of it for me, it's about transparency. So like when I started the podcast, November 11th, 2024, the first episode, we didn't say the word GA because people in my group said I shouldn't say it because step 11 says you can't involve GA and the media, blah 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 blah. So for the first few episodes, we would be like, I went to a 12-step meeting. And now, 72 episodes in, we say Gamblers Anonymous, we say GA. We talk about specific cities that we know have good GAs. Like LA right now is like I think the mecca of GA based on what I've researched and who I've spoken to. Like there's so many amazing meetings in LA for young people, for LGBTQ people, for everybody. But yeah, I think it's a lot of it. A lot. I think the most effective voice, and I know I might be biased, but the most effective voice right now is the lived experience voice as far as illuminating these different pathways, like you said, because we've done it. We've been there, right? And so it's just a matter of, you know, it's the people like Rob Minnick, like Odat, who's, reaching millions of people, millions of young people on TikTok. Like, you know, but kind of circling back to, your amazing answer to my question is that we can show all the pathways in the world, but until that person is ready, we're kind of at a standstill right now, right? Like we're kind of, I think we're experiencing like that 7 year lag that some studies say, where it's like from when you first start gambling until you hit that rock bottom moment, it takes years, right? Because like you're gonna hit a rock bottom, then you're gonna stop, and you're gonna white knuckle it. You might go to a couple meetings, but you're not ready, and then you get some money back, right? The dust settles, and then you go back out. Like so, for me, it's definitely about showing people the resources, but it's also about educating, right? It's about letting parents know about some of these red flags. Like, hey, if your kid is going to Target and getting a vanilla Visa gift card and they're all over his room, he's purchasing skins. Shout out to Kim from the Modern Meeting. Like her son was gambling at 11 years old, right? The kid, I mean, he's 11 and he's on the video games and she didn't know like because these kids are smart. You know what I mean? But like, if and I tell people all the time, like when I answer the hotline in Massachusetts where I'll tell parents like, I think my kid might have a problem with gambling and he keeps asking me for money for this and that. And I said, spoiler alert, he's asking you for money for gambling. Like there's no, you know what I mean? So it's like I think educating the parents and with the young people, I think there's a lot of education out there. It's unfortunately for the young people, I think the thing about my gambling is that I was born with it. It was on my mom's side of the family. I was playing craps at 9 years old. I was scratching scratch tickets. I was watching people scratch tickets. My path was it was going to happen no matter what. But I think right now in 2025, we're making people, right? Like
Mhm.
we're with the accessibility and the volume and just, who is not going to sign up for a $5 bet if they're going to get $200 or $300 in free credits? Everyone's going to try it, and there are some people who I think will try it and then never play again. People like my dad, people that don't have that. But people that land on that spectrum, maybe they're not where I was all the way at the end, but they might be somewhere in the middle. They're getting pushed over that side because of just how it's normalized and how, I used to work in the restaurant industry and I have people randomly text me like, "Hey, a senior in high school. Hey, how you doing? Good, good. Yeah, I think my boyfriend's friends, like, they have a problem with gambling. They're in high school, and I told them about your podcast. Like, that's all these little sample sizes. Like, it's not just happening in Southeast Massachusetts, right? If
Right.
it's happening there, it's happening everywhere. Um,
My
so I don't.
prediction, my prediction is I think there's going to be, we used to see a lot of very, very early onset, like kid at 5 years old learning how to play cards or poker or scratch offs. And then it was a longer period before it got to be concerning, problematic. What I'm predicting or seeing is there's going to be a later onset. So it's not going to be the stories of I started when I was 5 or 10, but it's going to be I got like in emerging adulthood or maybe teenage years. But then the problems with it are going to escalate sooner.
Oh, for
So our
sure.
our window is going to start a little bit later than normal, but the concerns of the behavior is going to rise faster versus before it used to be like a pretty long thing. And I know I said we had like a like one of the, a wrap up final question, but it was so interesting you brought up the parents part because like I have no problems parents telling me I'm worried about my kids being on their phone all the time. I'm worried about them playing video games. I'm worried about social media. But then like they don't want to say worried about the gambling. Yet the
Mm,
gambling's occurring on the phone in video games. Like social media even has some gamification and stuff like that.
sure.
But I think too, like it's also really hard or struggle for loved ones to even acknowledge it when for other things, like I don't know what parent would be like, no, social media, no problem. I don't
Right.
like or too much on their phone. No, they're on their phone. That's just fine. Like so many parents would agree with that statement. Then
Mm,
you bring up gambling and it's like, no, 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 no. Like that's not a thing or
yeah,
that's not a worry. That's not an issue. So I also think like how do we talk with others, at younger ages too, that really, if you're worried about those things, you should probably also pay attention to gambling because it fits in with all of it.
for sure. And I think too, it's like, it's about the isolation, right? It's like a lot of these young people that get dragged into it. You know, I know I'm going to sound like a millennial, and I'm barely a millennial, but like, we were playing wiffle ball. We were outside. The dinner bell, maybe it wasn't a dinner bell, but hey, you and your brother gotta be home at 5. That's dinner. We weren't playing video games in a dark room on a gamer chair all day, every day, right? And so it's like that, number one, I think is where a lot of this stems from. It's just like this culture of just isolation and just being on video games for hours on end. And you know yeah, I mean, think about like how easily, like, I was manipulated into gambling, like, and how I was just brought into the casinos and stuff. If I was 10 or 11 years old and I could play online blackjack, like, come on, you know what I mean? Like, it's just I don't know. I think that like I said, it starts with the parents, and it starts with educating. And the one thing I will say too, and this is kind of a hot take, but so I have people all the time, right, in my personal life, tell me how proud they are of me, and they listen to the podcast, and they do this and that. But then, let's say a year later, I'm having a conversation with them, and they're telling me, not realizing it, this happened. This person was telling me that their son or daughter, they're talking about their gambling habits. And I didn't even have to say anything. I just kind of like gave a look, like a raised eyebrow. And they're like, oh, relax. I mean, they're not like you. So it's like, immediately, that's the stigma, right? Like they tell me that they're proud of me. They tell me that, I'm so brave. Yet if it's happening under their roof, oh, no, 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 no. They're not. They don't have a problem, but they do. They did. You know what I mean? So like, I think that is a big thing that we don't realize too, is that it's not just the people struggling themselves that don't want to admit it. It's the loved ones don't want to admit that they are married to someone who's struggling with gambling.
Yeah,
So it's all we got a lot of stuff. We got a lot of stuff that we got to try to, break down. But you know, we'll get there. I think we're gonna get there because this thing is not gonna this. There's no happy ending to this thing, right? We just gotta.
right.
We need to educate. We need to be proactive, and to your point, we need to meet people where they are when they're ready to get help.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
And I think we're also, even though the position that things are in with what's going on with gambling and all that, I do feel like there's a lot of the work people have been doing is still putting us in a better position than where we've been in the past. You know, like
definitely,
imagine if the people we know, people we run in small circles with, gave up because of not being heard, not being listened to, all this would be going on without a lot of them being ready. Like this is what they've been preparing for and talking about. So a lot of kudos to people like you and others in this field who have just been constantly being the voice because may have been silent or muffled out. Doesn't mean people weren't screaming and hollering and warning, but I think there's more ears that are tuned in now than there were before. So, all right, final takeaway. I know one thing that we are gonna do is I'm gonna join your podcast in the future, so this might just become a part two of our conversation.
definitely.
But what final takeaways would you want audience members to know based on our conversation and the work that you're doing with the modern meeting?
Yeah, obviously, would love for you guys to check it out. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. A big kind of focusing more on YouTube lately, where I just released something that I'm getting a lot of great feedback on. So, long story short, back in 2020, so about a year and a half before I got help, yeah, I was having one of those weekends where I was broke and I said, you know what, this is it. This is my last night gambling. And I said, you know what? I'm going to videotape this. So that's going to make me not gamble too. And so I videotaped myself gambling, living in Vegas. I had about 2 hours of footage of me gambling, and it sat on my phone for 5 years. And once I started the podcast, I said, well, I'm gonna have to show this eventually. And so I did a two-part reaction video where 2025 Adam, am watching 2020 Adam gamble in the casino, and then I'm talking to the camera, heading to the casino, back from the casino. I wake up at 3 in the morning and talk to the camera. So it's pretty
Wow.
wild. It's pretty wild. It was very like Back to the Future-esque. It was very, but I'm glad I did it. It brought me back. It just kind of was a reminder, but I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I'm looking to continue to put out content that you know, I'm definitely, I would say my voice in this space is honest, maybe a little too honest, and I'm not polished. And I think if you're looking for some honest, raw conversations about addiction, specifically gambling, I think we provide a good, some good stuff for people to just think about. It's not just the people who are struggling, it's the affected loved ones, it's the people who are curious. I have on people like I'll definitely have you on, and I have other people who work in the space. And when people ask me like why I do it, like because sometimes I feel like I have a little bit of recovery overload where I feel like I'm just talking about recovery, thinking about recovery every day. And I tell them like, listen, I could talk about recovery every day for the rest of my life. And it's just, I found my passion. I found my purpose in life. I went through what I went through to get to this moment, and I wouldn't change anything. And people would say, what? You wouldn't change anything? Like you wasted 20 years. I didn't. It is what it is. It brought me to here, it brought me to where I'm supposed to be. And I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep I'm gonna keep telling my story. I'm gonna keep urging people to tell their story. And I think over time, the community is going to keep growing, not just not just the modern meeting community, but just this whole space. This whole space, we just got to keep building. We just got to keep building, and we got to keep, like you said, like showing people these pathways, showing people these rooms, and showing people like podcasts and YouTube channels that, you don't want to go to a meeting yet? All right. Did you see Adam's latest video? Like, go check that out. And it's gonna make you feel better.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm very,
Yeah.
very fortunate to get to work in this area with people like you, and I know our conversation may be ending right now. We're going to talk again later, but overall, it's good to know that the work that we all continue to do, we get to actually do it together too, which is a
Absolutely.
pretty unique experience, especially for an area that often feels, hidden, not seen, doesn't get the attention as other things. So it's a privilege to join you in this work. So I really
Appreciate you.
really great to have you on the podcast. I guess listeners, you can not just hear from us on this podcast, but future podcasts with Modern Meeting. Till then, like check it out. The YouTube is great as well. So I want to thank you, Adam, for joining, and it was a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you.